Welcome to the Diff. What if we could redesign everything? That's the question that we explore here at the world's largest online festival of ideas. My name's Seb and I'm going to be the host for the next 30 minutes. Apologies to all of you who have been patiently waiting. We have started a little bit late, but good things are worth waiting for. So thank you for joining us for these next 30 minutes. We're going to be talking about circular design. What is circular design? How are people applying it? And we're also going to be talking quite specifically about an exciting challenge or design brief that's been put out there, a collaboration between the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, RSA and Philips. And I'm actually joined by a fantastic group of guests for this session. I've got Simon Widmer from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation with me. I've got Rebecca Ford, who heads up the RSA Design Awards, and Kevin Shabazi from Philips. But before I introduce them and get them, I want to address you guys because you're the most important people for this session. The Diff is interactive and really want your comments, your questions. Challenge our guests, ask them something they've never been asked before and put them on the spot, because we've got them trapped here for the next 30 to 40 minutes, so they have to respond to you. There's a few different ways that you can do that. You can do that by using the hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter. You can perhaps most easily do it by posting the comments section just to the right-hand side of this video stream at thinkdiff.co. Just pop your comments and questions in there. My colleague Emma will be responding to you and feeding those questions through to me. Or you can do that also on the questions feature on YouTube if you've already navigated directly to the YouTube live stream. So get those questions and comments coming in. But let's chat to some of our guests. So we've got, so just to flag that Kevin is in fact joining us online on the big screen, and we've got Simon and Rebecca on the Diff sofa. Welcome. Simon, what is circular design?
I get the question every year, so I try to improve every year. At this time, I try to keep it to a minute if possible. It's very simple. It's basically to redesign everything for a circular economy. So whether it's a product, a service, or a system, to understand how can we meet the need that we all have, like user needs basically, within the context of a circular economy. And today, most of the things that we have around us, like whether it's a building, whether it's clothes or furniture or plastics bottles, they land up in landfills. They end up in incinerators. So the question is, how can we apply creative strategies to redesign them and make sure they never become waste in the first place? And while there's many avenues and many creative strategies, in the end, it all comes back to the three principles of designing out waste and pollution. And here, actually, we'll talk a bit more about that in later in the session. But here, one great example is to, from the outset, think about how do your material flows actually, where do they travel after use, and where do they, how do they come back? So you want to make sure that you're not just dealing with waste when it arises, but from the outset, design it out. Keeping products and materials in use. Great example, one of the winners actually of the RSA Student Design Award, Ellie Skelton, a toy for life. So how can a toy evolve over time? How can it be modular? How can you adapt it? And how can that be of most use as it evolves? And regenerate natural systems. A good example is Materium. So using locally abundant materials, you probably have seen the other Diff session.
We had Liz Corbin in the studio for
the launch.
Yeah.
Exactly. So making sure that whatever we use is a nutrient and not waste, and it regenerates. So those materials, they actually are of benefit after use. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's the three principles, and there's a lot of different strategies that we'll explore more.
So there's this big picture thing of going back to the beginning and not dealing with things at the end of pipe, and that's design is crucial for that.
Yeah.
And I guess this is like a big picture view of what circular design is, but how might a young designer watching or young innovator watching, how might they get started? Where do you start?
Because that was one of the big questions for us when we started the design program at the foundation. How can we help a large audience of designers to get started easily? And when we started to work with IDEO and leading universities on the Circular Design Guide, we basically had that in mind. So having a tool that anybody can use simply. So obviously
And that tool is the Circular Design Guide, which is a website where there's a load of methods and all sorts of things that people can access freely available.
Exactly. It's free. It's very easy to use. And yeah, it's not just a tool. It's basically, and I have here a little prop for you, Seb. It's basically also downloadable workshops. So you just need a couple of friends around the table, 1 hour of time, and you download one of the workshops, for example, the Circular Strategies workshop. And you find cards such as these. And then you use these strategies to redesign an item.
What is on that card? It's there's a nice, I can see
it's
there's
an
sort of
engine of
picture.
Caterpillar. Basically, it says product life extension. So it's 6 strategies that help you to redesign, either by choosing different materials, by using modularity in the design, so it's easier to disassemble, to loop it back, to repair it, and so on, to embed intelligence and information so that your design actually can communicate. So what if our packaging or even our clothes could actually communicate across the use phase and after use phase, and the sorting plant actually knew what is in my clothes, so it can come back, right? Because if it's like just a mess of different materials, like, what can you do with it, right? So all these different strategies, people can explore that on the Circular Design Guide. And redesign items around us.
So the idea is on those cards there's some kind of prompt that sparks a rethink of something that is kind of intuited from the product. I picked up on from what you said that you kind of said sit down with your friends at the table. That kind of implies a much broader understanding of the meaning of designer, perhaps, than some people may be watching and not really identify themselves as a designer. Is that fair to say? The Circular Design Guide is not only for people with designer in their job title.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So it's when you look at what designers really do and what design is all about, you start to realize like that design is somebody everybody can get involved in. Like we all can be intentionally creating and applying design thinking methods, for example, like prototyping, focusing on user needs, but also zooming out and understanding the system. So it's not rocket science. Everybody can be a designer and get started. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So Rebecca, the RSA is a acronym or an abbreviation that I know, and I sort of have this intuitive thing that's very cool and it's very prestigious. And when Simon told me that we were working with the RSA on a design award challenge, I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. But then my girlfriend asked me, what is RSA? And I actually had to Google it. So for anyone else who's like me, who's heard of it or maybe hasn't heard of it, what is RSA and what does it do?
So the RSA was actually founded a really long time ago, back in the Enlightenment era in the mid-1700s, by a group of people who wanted to come together and look at the big challenges that we were facing in the world at that time and try and surface new ideas and support new solutions to those challenges. And actually, although the issues that we face evolve and change all the time, that founding mission remains the same today. And we work in a lot of different areas. We have a big action and research centre looking at public service innovation, the economy, education. We have a public events programme, 29,000 members or fellows that are committed to social change for the long term. And the programme I run is the RSA Student Design Awards, which is a global competition that challenges university students and new graduates from all backgrounds and disciplines. You don't have to be studying a design subject to respond to some of the big societal challenges that we're facing in the world today.
And circular design or circular economy, I guess, is one of this year's design briefs. What's the story behind how that's become a part of I guess, the RSA's output?
Yeah, so we definitely see, enabling the shift away from the linear economy, take, make, dispose, to a circular economy as one of the critical issues of our era. And we actually work in partnership with a lot of different organisations to develop our design challenges. And Philips is one of our long-term partners. And it's always a very collaborative process. So we'll look at the kind of issues that the RSA is concerned with and also the big priorities for our our partners, and for Philips, this real commitment to a circular economy is one of the critical things that they're focused on. We've worked with Philips for many years now, and then this year we had a new partnership formed with you guys, with Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well, and decided that actually applying circular design thinking to healthcare, emergency healthcare in particular, was a really interesting new area for a design challenge.
Yeah, we're going to hear a bit more from Kevin about that specific challenge. It's kind of one of those examples when we were talking just a moment ago about how do you make it practical, that we've got this brief as an example. Feels like in some of the language around the RSA Design Awards, there's the systems thinking as a part of it, as well as the big issues. What is that? What kind of makes a little bit of a distinction for you guys? Is that the element that you sort of try and zero in on?
I think so. There are a lot of different design competitions and competitions generally out there, but I think something that's different about the RSA is this focus on really complex systemic issues, as you say, and that's something that the RSA is concerned with generally. We have a phrase to try and capture our model of change, which we call think like a system and act like an entrepreneur, and that's what we're wanting, students and the next generation to start doing through wrestling with the challenges in our design briefs.
We actually had a session earlier during the diff from Gene Bellinger, who's someone who writes an awful, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he writes an awful bit about system thinking. He said the first rule of systems thinking is you don't talk about systems thinking. But I quite like the idea that, think like in systems, but actually act like an entrepreneur, because his point was really that systems thinkers almost talked themselves out of the conversation by creating this bubble. Like I said, we'll hear a bit more about specific briefs, but how does the challenge actually work? Anyone watching now, can anyone be involved, or are there specific groups of people who should be getting involved?
So the challenge is live now, so open to any currently enrolled student anywhere in the world studying on any course to tackle.
Undergraduate, postgraduate?
Yep, undergrad, postgrad, any level, and it's also open to new graduates within a year of graduating. So the challenge is live, but the actual submissions period will be from January, the 14th of January, we'll open for entries, and that will run through to mid-March. The final deadline is the 13th of March. And after that, we have a very rigorous judging process. So we do anonymous shortlisting, and then we meet all of our finalists in person. We invite them into the RSA to actually have a conversation with our judging panels.
And is there a prize?
There is, yes. There's a nice chunky cash prize. But I'd actually say the bigger benefits of winning an RSA Student Design Award are around the amazing kind of networks that you tap into, becoming an RSA fellow, but also linking in with our partner organisations, becoming part of an amazing alumni community, because we've actually been running the awards for over 90 years.
Wow.
So we've got alumni that span different, generations and disciplines all over the world. People like Johnny Ive at Apple, Bill Moggridge, who actually founded IDEO. He won an award back in the day and said that it was that gave him the confidence to start his own design firm, Radio.
Which I also found really kind of exciting when we started working together, I think it's like 1.5 years ago, when we discussed the awards more closely, and just seeing the impact the awards have on the design community more broadly, and how it really can affect your outlook as well into your career, and the fact that Johnny Ive, for example, mentions this on his website was really impressive to me. Like looking at the impact that the RSA has.
Another thing actually to mention is that for some people they might work on this design challenge and then don't have a desire to take their solution further, and that's okay. But if there is that appetite to actually further develop it, perhaps try and bring it to market, then there's loads of ways that we and our partners can help support with that. And actually increasingly we're seeing winners having the desire to do that, and I know you've actually connected with quite a few of them in recent years.
There certainly seems like there's something about this open innovation challenge in the world of design that just unlocks ideas, unlocks creativity. I think Chris Grantham always say it's great to have constraints
Yeah.
as a designer, and obviously that's kind of what a brief gives you, right? It gives you those constraints.
It gives you constraints, but it's also open. So the format of the solution could be anything. It could be a whole new business model. It could be, a different service design proposal. It could be a product service system. Very open in terms of the type of solution.
Yeah. So Kevin has been waiting patiently online, hopefully waiting patiently online. And Kevin, obviously you're going to tell us a bit more about this from the Philips side, but actually I think what's really interesting as well is to reflect a bit on how you've got to where, a little bit the path you've taken to get to where you are now, where you're actually in many ways playing a big role in these briefs, because obviously your background is that as a design student at TU Delft, but you also took part in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's higher education program, the Smith MacArthur Fellowship, which is a circular economy innovation program. I would just wonder if you could just give us a little bit of the 60 to 90 second Kevin Shabazi comic book style origin story, your Wolverine story, how you got from design student at TU Delft to circular design in your job title at Philips.
90 seconds.
Well,
exactly
you can take 100 seconds.
Well, I think you mentioned it. I was exposed to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's ideas at the University of TU Delft, and seized the opportunity to apply for the fellowship. And that pretty much opened the door for me to be connecting with partner networks, much like RSA strives to do. And I came in with a pretty clear head saying, I want to apply these ideas to a setting, in an industrial setting, in a applied way. And Philips were interested in the ideas, and we crafted a kind of project together as my graduation. And then it kind of just became, okay, so what if you were to stay and continue working on this? And let's figure out how to shape this into something. And it's grown from a graduation assignment towards a bigger and bigger project every year.
And as a designer, what was it that inspired you about the circular economy?
I think building off of what Simon was saying, ultimately, if you're able to see people's needs and understand their desires and what it is to be human very clearly, that doesn't have anything to do with consuming stuff. So that opens up a world of possibilities to fulfill those needs, to help people in many, many new different kinds of ways. So in a designer's ability to see these things, to keep these needs in the center, but also think broadly, I felt compelled to act on it.
And I mean, obviously, it's you partly met Philips through our network. What is it so enticing about a concept like that for a huge business like Philips?
Right. I think one of the core tenets of the circular economy is that we keep value. We're trying to maximize value over time and not depend on depreciation of assets in a business case, or even just to avoid it in a customer's case. So it's better for our customers to actually have their assets up and running, to have value lasting over time through circular interventions or through circular solutions. And it's also better for us, a better relationship with customers and value propositions that deliver long term on our promise. So why haven't we all been living in a circular world until now? That's what I want to know.
That's a good question. That's a question that we have been asking various guests at the DIF. So we've got this concept that Simon sort of outlined. We've got the designer who's compelled by it. We've got the business that's willing to support it. I wonder if it's a great time to go sort of kind of practical on it. And we've got this fantastic opportunity with the design brief that's been collaborated on with Rebecca and RSA. Why emergency healthcare, I guess, is the broad question of why is that a compelling circular design brief?
Well, maybe to give a kind of background on Philips. Many people on the call probably think of Philips as a lighting company or a TV company. But a couple of years ago, we made a bold decision to focus on healthcare. So we're trying to improve the lives of 3 billion people a year on this earth. And in order to reach that kind of massive scale and to spread access to care, you do need to kind of think differently. And of course, that's bringing together something complicated like healthcare, which is not simple, and circular economy, which in itself also is not simple, and the intersection of the two is yeah, absurdly complex, I would guess, for anyone. So to simplify that, also we started with the type of care which would be a little bit accessible to more people to investigate. Emergency care, it's about the care that needs to happen now, the acute care for ill and injured people, and all of us have some kind of exposure to that. I mean, whether it's seeing an ambulance go by or being involved as a bystander in an event, or ourselves going to an emergency department to get that thing checked, which really needs to be checked now. There are different examples of emergency care that we all kind of have experience with. So we wanted to give a challenge which was open enough for many people to participate on while still being relevant to us. And we are active in the area of emergency care as Philips as well, and are interested in hearing these bright ideas that people have.
It's obviously, emergency care is not a specific product, right? It's
No.
It's kind of a system in itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's a system that deals with unplanned medical emergencies. So it's totally different than other kinds of healthcare that, where you plan an appointment and you're able to deal with things in a more chronic way. Emergency care, it needs to happen right now. So and that's the highest priority. So everything, the way it's delivered, you see lots of different ways in which it's delivered. And therefore, you also see lots of challenges and opportunities to improve it by applying circular design principles.
And what are some of the key challenges that you're looking for the students potentially to tackle?
Right. Well, I think so. Maybe to understand the challenges, understanding the way it works, I could give a couple of seconds to describe just the way it works. So emergency care has a large variation in acuity. So it can be people coming for emergency care who have a life and death issue or just an urgent issue. But even though, despite all this variation, it's pretty consistent. There are about 5 different phases you see. And the first is to identify, who are you? What's wrong with you? Second is to triage. What is the most appropriate care location for you? Should you be here, or where should you be? How can we help you? Third is to evaluate, what's the most likely reason you have health issues? You want to do that quickly and so that you can treat them. The third is to, what can we do immediately to improve your health? And last is disposition. So what is the appropriate place to continue treatment? Because you don't want to stay in an emergency department. You need to make way for others. And the nature of emergencies, that they're not predictable, means that you have to look at it in a systemic way. I mean, where it occurs, what is going on. It could be anything from a heart attack to an accident. And that response needs to take place and requires resources as well. So are those resources in the right place? Is the system able to act fast enough? Do we have our ability to cover all the emergencies that are going on? Those are some of the problems. And specifically, if you go deeper and start investigating this, which we encourage anyone who's investigating this field, you'll notice fragmented data, sometimes ineffective routing because of the unpredictable nature, and this trade-off between efficiency, doing things fast and now, and efficacy, doing the thing that's long-term beneficial. There's a lot of puzzles around these things, and of course, resources are needed to sustain all of these activities and affect how accessible care is in remote locations and other areas. So we'd encourage you to look at all of this complexity. We tried to scope it for you, but also that became difficult. So we encourage you to just find a starting point, and it doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to, eat the whole elephant.
They had to redesign
Look at the
all
users.
of emergency care.
that wouldn't be feasible. And also, I think I like what you said about think like a system and act like an entrepreneur. I encourage the designers to try this as well. The benefit of applying a design mindset to it as well is you will get immersed into the system, and you'll see all the users that are involved in emergency care. So there's patients, there's also the clinicians, the people responding, there's some kind of transport, thinking about what their needs are, how they work together, how resources fit into that. If you're able to crack that, you'll see how healthcare and circular economy can reinforce each other. And yeah, we do encourage you to pick a clear focus, like a region or a type of event. We're leaving it open. We're open to being surprised. And in order to be successful, do need to look a little bit deeper. Even though we leave it open, we do want you to go deep, which is why you need to focus. I'm sorry if this is a lot of seemingly contradictory advice, but
focus,
we know
look
you can
deep
take it.
know everything. Yeah, I mean, this challenge, Rebecca, is live, and I guess you must be getting feedback already from people who are trying to tackle it. What sort of response are you getting?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, people are finding it a tough challenge, but also a rewarding one in terms of really wrestling with the complexity that Kevin's just outlined. I know people have found it really helpful using the design guide. I've had a lot of feedback on that. One question that keeps coming up, actually, which maybe Kevin could help to answer, is around, obviously there's, when it comes to medical equipment especially, usually you have a lot of clinical trials before you would suggest implementing something. And so I've had some questions around how future-focused solutions can be when perhaps the equipment or the tech that students are looking at might not have been proven yet. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Kevin.
So unproven tech.
Yeah,
what's its
I mean,
role in-
I would probably say in response to that, we are looking for genuinely future-focused solutions, and just do what you can. Speak to as many experts as you can, and get a sense of the feasibility. And at least if you can show that, I think it's still worth, if you've honed in on a real opportunity area that does involve some new tech that's not brought to market yet, it's still worth proposing it. But I don't know if you have other thoughts, Kevin.
Right. I think that's one of the key things that make it difficult. Obviously, innovating in healthcare requires some care into how you do it, and FDA approvals are just one way of making sure that we don't create harm to populations. So, indeed, I think what Rebecca is saying is a good idea. We're looking for the thinking, the thought behind it, and any way to kind of help prove or make steps is good. We're not necessarily looking for something we can put in the market on Monday. I think also looking at the technology aspect and focusing on making a feasible technology may not actually address entirely the system aspect. So careful where you're placing your details, because it may actually work well to prove that function, but did that function resolve the problem of access to care and the resource dependency of care?
Those are two big themes that we end up talking about a lot. One is, technology is a really fantastic tool, but how is it being used, and it's not a magic silver bullet. And the other one is that circular economy and circular design is unproven. So if you're a business trying to justify switching to a new business model, or if you're trying to justify sourcing your materials from a completely new place, that is one of the challenges, is it hasn't been proven. We've got some great questions coming in from the audience, so thank you so much for sending those in. Keep them coming on the session page. I'm going to a couple of ones about someone who's got a current brief that we might put to Kevin. So keep them coming on the session page, #ThinkDiff. Just before we do that, though, one of my colleagues has prepared a little teaser for what else you can check out during the diff.
Hi, my name is Leo, and here's a little taster of things to come at the diff. Up next in the live studio at 8 PM UK time, we have the session Abundant Materials and Universal Manufacturing, Future or Fiction. In it, we'll be exploring how open source production, access to the means of production, and the sharing of knowledge about locally abundant materials has the ability to transform our economy from one that is wasteful and centrally controlled to one that is regenerative by design. Our first live on-air session, taking place tomorrow, is titled Transforming the Sachet Economy to a Circular Economy, and it takes place at 10 AM UK time. You won't want to miss it. And just to remind you all that there are close to 100 pieces of content up on the thinkdiff.co schedule. Yesterday, we had the CEO of iFixit, Carl Wiens, joining us from California in the on-air session titled The Innermost Loop to Profit is Repair, the Business of the Future. And that's all from me. back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Leo. So check out those recommendations. We've actually had now over 500,000 views on diff content already this year. So thank you everyone for tuning in, for asking your questions and comments. It's fantastic. And we hope we'll continue to see you over the next 6 or 7 days of live content. Great, so we've had a little bit of a deep dive into circular emergency healthcare. And we've got some great questions coming in from the audience. One that's specifically about RSA is why did RSA get interested in circular economy, which you kind of touched on, but they ask again, is circular economy like a theme in itself for the RSA, or is it part of another broader set of things that the organisation looks at?
Yeah, so the RSA actually has done lots of work in the circular economy area. So we ran a 4-year programme called the Great Recovery Project, which was specifically looking at the role of design and designers in the circular economy. That closed a couple of years ago, but all the content's online, so I'd recommend checking that out. And actually, my colleague Josie is taking part in a diff session later on at 8 o'clock today, and she's going to be talking about some of the work she's doing around making and manufacturing and circularity. So
it's abundant materials and universal manufacturing. Kevin, we actually had a question specifically about kind of, I'm not sure if it's the RSA design brief or whether it's another brief, but they were asking about the issue of patient confidentiality. Is that a factor in all of this, data and those topics?
It is a big factor, and the more you get into it, the more you'll see that patients have different preferences with respect to confidentiality. And at the same time, information is needed to help a system flow, to help a response be gathered. So they are tricky. I can't give a straightforward answer of what way you should be taking it, but you're stumping me. A great question.
We have another question for you, which is, I'm not sure if you don't even have a viewpoint on this, but I quite like it, so I'm going to ask you. What product from Philips needs an urgent circular intervention the most?
Urgent circular.
Or maybe even another way of phrasing that question is, what product would you most like to redesign if you had the, what are you working on?
Well, I have 2 answers to this. One if I have to stick to the brief, and one if I have to be
give us
more
both
honest.
Answers.
Pardon me?
Give us both answers.
Well, we are committed to our target for 2020 of having 15% circular revenues and closing the loop on all professional medical equipment by, don't quote me on this, 2025, I believe. And that's where we're really trying to make a lot of headway, and we see a lot of gains there. I would like to challenge us also to do all the consumer products as well, which are increasingly moving towards health, consumer health products. Those are the trickier ones. There's a lot more products out in the market there, and they're of lower value compared to these larger medical equipment, and that's where you really face a lot of systemic issues as well.
What type of
we
products?
Have to focus.
Just to give.
Which types?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I will have colleagues coming to me after for each of these. I will just keep it open. I mean,
consumer
all
products.
of the consumer. Pardon me.
Just consumer
That's
products.
That's an example.
Yeah.
You said it, not me. That's a great example of one which could be redesigned, thinking of circular economy in mind. Of course, that is a challenge as well. It could have been the challenge this year for the RSA as well. It's a tough one because of things that the real challenges of getting a toothbrush and a Sonicare to everyone's home means it has to be affordable in today's system, and there are so many factors in the economy that are still linear. So that is a real practical challenge. How do you actually get affordable? Now I'm pitching a different brief.
But it's a fascinating example because it's the question of, if you think about toothbrush, for example, you've got to think like the system that exists around that toothbrush, which is way more complex than anyone would probably immediately think about. At least when I brush my teeth at night, I don't think about it. But there's also an element of acting like the entrepreneur and being really practical, because it is a physical thing, it's an everyday product, and how do you do it? So if anyone wants to take that brief on, then it sounds like Kevin is open to it.
It's a separate brief, you can email me those ideas.
We did run a brief last year with Unilever looking at applying circular design principles to fast-moving consumer goods. Yeah, and the winner of that looked at the cosmetics industry, and she designed a refillable mascara.
Oh, Pippa.
And she used the circular design guide as part of her solution, and found that to be a brilliant tool, and has since connected with Simon. So.
That's really
So how, I mean, there's actually one specific question for you, Simon, but just because it's come up a couple of times that they use the circular design guide, the students are finding it useful. How are people using that tool? Is it?
Yeah, there's kind of different audiences and different journeys through the guide. I think most of the people are really keen to understand like what is the role of design in the circular economy. So the landing page just tells you the story of why it matters, what is circular design, why does it matter. But then I think what people find very useful are the different methods and tools. So we have like tools that are specifically helpful for designers and companies, like Philips, Unilever, all these names that we've heard. And then more like the learning journey for learners and students. So like, how can we redesign an item? How can we bring this learning journey like in systems thinking? Like what does it mean, like the toothbrush, for example? We have an example last year that's really interesting. Somebody putting the toothbrush at the center and mapping the system around it, and what intervention points we need to make it fit for circularity, not just from a product lens, but like from a systems lens. So to come back to your question, I think the story, like understanding the importance of it, and then understanding which tools and methods are helpful for designers and companies, students, and so on, that differs a lot. Like the journey is different. I do think that the videos are quite useful, like designers talking about circular.
There's lots of interactive content on the Circular Design Guide that tells some stories and of designers and design in action.
Yeah. Actually, and I think one of the very specific tools I want to highlight is the Safe and Circular tool that we've launched just I think 2 months ago with the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute, and that specifically was something we've developed based on the questions from designers, like how can I make material choices for a circular economy? It's like a big topic, like which materials should I choose that is both circular, like can be looped back, repaired, recycled, whatever, but it's also safe. How can we marry these two concepts? And so that's something we have specifically developed because we heard the question so many times. And now, as we are moving into the next phase of circular design and really want to scale this up as well, we're really listening to designers and listen what they need in terms of tools and learning content. So there's much more to come on that front.
There's been a bit on Safe and Circular during the diff. We've got a podcast people can listen to. And also yesterday we had a whole host of entrepreneurs who are trying to apply, they're basically applying the principles of cradle-to-cradle design in their products, and that's available to watch again. So lots to catch up on there. Today we've released the diff's feature film, System Reset, and a lot of these themes, big themes, come up in it. I want to play a clip that I've lined up to that kind of touches on some of these themes.
So one of the things that we are very much involved in is rethinking learning and rethinking the educational system. So the maker movement also moves into the educational system with maker education. And this is not just to bring creativity and technology into the schools, but we see it as a disruptor of creating learning communities, of peer-to-peer learning, of problem solving, about approaching knowledge in a different way. I think maker education can bring all this to the table. And by putting this as a center of learning, you will also have other people, the capacity of people to be part of this movement, for the distributive by design, thinking about other out of the box, out of the black box into other solutions. This capacity will grow. And unfortunately, a lot of the education is still just copying what generations before have done before. And I believe we should create new knowledge and new approaches and new capacities for the future.
So that's a little snippet from the feature-length film that we've just released today called System Reset. We're extremely proud of it, and you should definitely check that out. If you watch one thing over the next week, have a view of that. You know, a new way of thinking about education and learning must touch on massively crossover with some of the themes that RSA work on and the issues they work on, and also the point of doing innovation challenges and design briefs is to connect people together and create the learning communities that Marlene Sticker, actually, I should have introduced her there, was talking about in that clip. We're actually running out of time, and I've got lots of questions I haven't managed to get to, so I'm going to try and race through a few of them. Any favourite examples of circular economy innovation? Maybe we start with you, Kevin, on that. A favourite example of circular economy design or innovation?
Sure. A couple of years ago, we worked with some of our teams in Lumea, which is a hair removal device that we have. And I'm quite keen on service design and its contribution to a circular economy. We started thinking about a lease model where you didn't actually have to buy the Lumea. You could actually kind of rent it, and it does what it needs. It helps you permanently remove your hair, and you access it, and when you're done, gets sent to another user, heads replaced, so on. It's quite simple, actually. It's elegant and it's simple, and it's working. So that's an example where I think started as an idea, and I've been able to watch it grow at Philips. So I would, for that reason, call it a favorite.
Great. And Simon, we've had a question about closing the loop or circulating materials and components. Yeah. Someone who maybe has a bit of knowledge about the circular economy and some of the things that we talk about. Do you see a difference between these two approaches, and how does that play into some of the things that the Circular Design Guide and our work on circular design looks at?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question because it touches onto the two parts of the butterfly. Closing the loop can be almost like, you bend a pipe and you keep things in the same pipe, right? But then you don't really allow for the components or the materials to go into other applications, which might also be very valuable, right? So if it limits our thinking and forces us to only think in one material stream or one product, I think that can be a risk. I like the way you described circulating materials and nutrients, or I don't know exactly the wording, but nutrients, materials, and components a lot, because it allows for that kind of like looping into the same application, but also it allows for leaky loops, as kind of Webster would call it. So like in nature, for example, systems are very regenerative and circular, but there, one building block doesn't have to go into the same animal, right? It can become a tree, it can become this animal, it can become that, right? So it's building blocks, nutrients that can go into different applications. So I really like that way of framing it.
Fantastic. And so I'm really pushing time now, but I always think of Kevin as an example of a circular designer, someone who's really embedded in the circular economy, obviously has a design background and is actually doing stuff at Philips. We have a campaign that allows other people who are circular designers to share themselves or share their content, their ideas, their challenges, to build this learning community. Do you want to just give a little quick plug to that?
Yeah, it's something that's very close to my heart. I think a lot of what we do as a foundation is to help people to make sense of the circular economy, but also to share their own ideas around circular design. And now we have a little plant growing. It's this idea of running a campaign and asking people about their circular designs. And they've started that on Instagram yesterday with the hashtag Circular Designers, asking people to share their ideas, their challenges as well in terms of circular designs. And that can be anything from a rough idea or sketch, very rough, like something that we just come across and like we wonder like how we can redesign these things, to something that's already much more refined, like the winners of the New Plastics Economy Circular Design Prize, right? And we'll share a couple of examples, and we're really looking for any idea that people have, and just upload your picture, use the hashtag Circular Designers, and join a campaign and learn about all the other designers that are around you. Maybe there's the circular designer just next to you in the same town, and you just haven't really met him yet. How
And
are you?
Rebecca, for any circular designers who have heard a bit today about the circular economy, heard a bit about the challenge that Philips have laid out, what's their next step? Where should they go? What should they do?
They should go and read the brief and start tackling it.
And that is available.
That's on our website, RSA Student Design Awards. Google that and it'll come up.
Fantastic. Well,
I'll
thank
share
you.
the link as a follow-up to today as well.
Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this evening or this afternoon, this morning, depending where you are in the world. So what will you redesign? That's the question that I think all of our panellists leave us with. Thank you so much for joining this DIF session, for your questions and comments and for your patience at the beginning. Remember, at 8 o'clock GMT, so in 2 hours' time, we have a session with Alicia Gamalevich from Materium and Rebecca's colleague, Jose Warden from RSA, and they're going to be talking about abundant materials and universal manufacturing, and they're going to be arguing that that is not fiction but the future. So tune into that session at 8 GMT and keep engaging with us using hashtag ThinkDiff.